This is part two of a special Mason-Dixon line with brilliant political strategist Sally Bradshaw, the Republican, and the equally brilliant Screven Watson, the Democrat. We'll go into the cabinet races and some of the amendments. And let's begin with the primaries for Attorney General, where Lieutenant Governor Kottkamp enjoys a whisker-thin lead, a mustache
Well,
lead.
the news out of all these races, and we'll be talking about the down-ballot races, is the high number of undecideds. Screven and I talked about that a little while ago. There's just a tremendous number of undecideds in both of the AG primaries. And you do have an interesting situation for Jeff Kottkamp, because he should be the best known of the Republicans running for Attorney General, but clearly he's pulling a whopping 13% of the vote. He has a way to go with over 70% of the voters undecided.
And yet Holly Benson at 5%. Is she staying in this race?
Well, she's within the margin of error. I mean, you have two candidates, Pam Bondi and Holly Benson, who are within 5 points of each other in a sample size which I think is 400. I mean, the news, if there is news, is in these down-ballot races, unlike in the U.S. Senate race and the governor's race, no one is focused, no money has been spent. And until that happens, you know, later this summer, you're not going to see movement in these numbers.
And the undecideds in the AG's race on both parties are over 70%. But let's look at the two state senators duking it out in Gelber and Ehrenberg. Gelber enjoying a little bit of a lead, but with the margin of error, really not a lead.
Yeah, as Sally said, and nobody knows either one of these. You have Dan Gelber from Miami and Dave Ehrenberg from Palm Beach. That's where you're probably seeing most of these numbers. It does show, though, that if you speak, as Senator Gelber does, on every issue in the Senate, you don't get much bump from that.
Now, we polled in the CFO race as if the general election were about to be held. And there, undecideds at 41% poll higher than President of the Senate Atwater at 33 and Loran Ausley at 26, but she's closer than a lot of people would have thought.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, you have a Senate president sitting there who has been running for this, both officially and unofficially, for several years now, and to have Loran get in as late as she did and to be that close, you know, it still shows 70% undecided. This is going to be in the AG's race and in these other down-ballot races is going to be about who raises the most money, who marshals that money and doesn't spend it, but who communicates the best. And I think that's what we're going to see here both in all of these races.
Well, and at this point, you could put Screven Watson or Sally Bradshaw on these ballots. You'd see about the same numbers. I mean, they
Are you
mirror.
making an announcement?
No, I'm
here
not.
today? Okay.
Certainly
I think
not.
I'd poll a little higher.
Do you?
Only at your house.
But the bottom line is you don't have a situation where either of these candidates is well known. Being president of the Senate doesn't make you well known. In Florida, the way you get name recognition is you serve in elected office statewide or you buy name recognition. And what's important about these races is who has the money. You have a situation in the CFO race where Jeff Atwater has over $2 million, and I think Loran Ausley's raised about $350,000. That's a significant margin, and it will come into play as the race goes.
How big a surprise? No, it's early, almost 40% undecided, that in the Ag Commissioner race, Congressman Adam Putnam, who's been running for the better part of 2 years, is actually running behind on paper to Scott Maddox.
Yeah, I was somewhat shocked, but not really. Scott has been out there a long time. Mayor of Tallahassee, ran a very impressive race for Attorney General, and then was a League of Cities president where he traveled the states. A lot of people know Scott. He really has an underestimated ground operation out there. And, you know, I don't know whether being a congressman in this environment's hurting Putnam or not, but again, I thought it was very good for Scott to show up where he was.
But that's the news in this race, that Scott does have higher name ID, yet he's pulling less than a third of the vote. I mean, the fact that Scott Maddox is not going to be the Ag Commissioner, I mean, it's like NASA recruiting the three of us to train in the astronaut training program for the space shuttle. I know you want to do that, but it's
toss a couch.
It's not.
He wears boots very well.
It's not going to happen. The guy has absolutely no background in the subject, and the fact that he's not pulling higher than a third of the vote with higher name recognition. Again, he has no money. $300,000 is what he's showing so far in receipts raised. You've got Adam Putnam with over $1.5 million. So what's going to happen in these down ballot races, and Screven knows this, is at the end of the day, the people who can buy the name recognition are the likely winners, and right now the Republicans are much better positioned.
But some money might more likely flow to Scott Maddox now that he's polling when this poll comes out.
He's polling a whopping 31%.
Yeah, but the same you can say for Jeff Atwater. I mean, Jeff Atwater, the Senate president's at 33. I mean, we got to go back to what we started this. These races are wide open. It's anybody's race, and to dismiss Scott Maddox right now is like dismissing Marco Rubio 6 months ago. I mean,
no, I don't think it is. I think
we got a long way to go.
All right, I'm going to leave that one just as it is. Some of the constitutional amendments that we tested, not a surprise that Floridians, over 70% want to give a property tax break to military veterans who are within a year of their service. But hometown democracy, cities hate it, Counties hate it. The business community hates it. Today, if it's on the ballot, it passes. So what does that say about the need for a funded campaign, which is lining up against it? Sally?
Well, I mean, clearly no money has been spent against that, and voters are not educated on the specifics of really any of these initiatives because there's been no publicity behind them. This is a bad amendment, and the business community is against it. It is something that will essentially shut down development, which to voters on the surface sounds great. We don't want more development. We live in Florida, we have enough, but the truth is you will kill any revenues coming in, as a result of killing development and forcing things to go to the ballot once a year. You'll have a ballot that will be thousands of pages long, and voters will have to wade through this information. They'll stop any income to hospitals, any revenue streams that go into the communities. It is a real problem.
These amendments, Ron, I mean, you have to get to 60%, which is a tough threshold. So if you're starting out at 61 before anybody's spent a dollar, you can see and you know that there's opposition to this from the people you name. So I think when that opposition gets together and they run an effective campaign, those numbers are going to drop down. That's going to be a tough one to
Interesting
pass.
Coalition of education groups and the business community pushing for revision in class size, supported by legislative leadership. Right now, that's only at 44% approval. It's got to get up another 15, 16%. It's an uphill battle, but it can be won.
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes back to the money and who's on what side of these and what kind of money is behind the support or oppose. I mean, I think the fact that it starts out at 44 is troublesome. It's going to take a lot of money and a very organized campaign to get that up.
Do you think that voters, when there are this many ballot proposals, let's say statewide constitutional amendments in this November's case, go down the ballot and are really discriminating and reading the ballot language and voting selectively, or do we tend to see an all yes or all no vote?
No, they're not reading selectively. We would like them to read selectively, and that's why these campaigns to educate voters about the significance of these issues is so important.
You asked earlier, I think, about debates. I think editorial boards play a real big role in these constitutional amendments. I've literally seen many voters go in with the editorial cutout for these amendments, and I think that when you look to see how these editorials are going when we get closer, you may have a foreshadowing of where this is going.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I have never seen a voter in a voting booth with a copy of a St. Pete Times
Well, you
editorial
can't go
making a
in
decision.
you can't go in the voting booth.
I've never seen someone walk into a polling place with a newspaper.
I
other than to
have.
read
So
the
you don't
sports
spend much time in
section.
Broward County in the condos.
Well, it's going to be an interesting election cycle. We're now in an active season of taping the Mason-Dixon line. We know you'll both be back. A final word of wisdom to Republicans out there?
Well, they've got to focus on turnout and raising money, getting out the vote.
And Democrats, any different?
No, it's the same. I mean, organization and money, and going and seeing people still matters in this state, especially when undecideds are so high. But it'll all boil down to communication.
And I would say, though, the big surprise for me in this particular polling we did was Scott Maddox showing so well, notwithstanding it's early.
I cannot believe you're bringing that up again, just to goad me. This is where you're letting your partisan stripes show.
Oh, I'm partisan.
The truth of the matter is Scott Maddox, if you want to revisit it, Scott Maddox's name ID is higher. He's been running for something since he was in diapers.
Putnam
and so
has too. He's only 12. He's been in
Putnam
Congress
is from
14
Polk
years.
County, and he's been in the Congress and he's not known. You see huge undecideds, and you see an Adam Putnam who has significantly more financial resources.
Who is a
to
protege
get
of Tom
done.
DeLay, and that will
Let's
come
put
back
a
to
Florida-bred steak dinner on that one.
Yeah,
Sally?
when we get to the prediction show, it'll be fun.
Sally
That's all a steak dinner.
Well, and wine. All right. Sally and Scriven, thank you very much. Hope all your candidates and issues are shaping up well. We'll see you next time on the Mason-Dixon Line.